I may not live to see our glory,
I may not live to see our glory,
but I will gladly join the fight.
but I will gladly join the fight.
And when our children tell our story,
And when our children tell our story,
they'll tell the story of tonight.
let's have another round tonight.
Let's have another round tonight.
Let's have another round tonight.
Raise a glass to freedom, something they can never take away, no matter what they tell you.
Raise a glass to the stories. Tomorrow there'll be more of these. Exploring the story of tonight.
Let's raise another glass tonight.
Exploring the story of tonight.
Raise a glass to stories.
Exploring the story of tonight.
Raise a glass to stories.
Exploring the story of tonight.
Hello and welcome to Raise a Glass, the podcast where we talk about the stories and storytellers that shape us. My name is Hunter Danson.
And I'm Eric Lintola.
And I feel like this is a finale episode, the end of season 2. And I think that this is the episode where we will finally name the college that has not yet been named. Because I don't think we can avoid it at this point. Nice. Yes. The man himself on Eric's t-shirt.
Mm-hmm. I thought about bringing my cane. Oh, yes, I have it.
Oh, the cane. Yeah.
We can discuss this later.
Yeah. Yeah, I have mine in my closet. Because we're talking about Hamilton. Yeah, it feels like we've been building up to this episode, like our whole podcast.
Mm-hmm.
We
I don't know
mentioned
if
it.
anybody else has felt this way, but we have definitely felt this way since before we started this podcast.
Yeah.
About a year ago, right?
Yeah, I guess
Is it
so.
over a year ago now? When did we start this? Our first episode came out on August 31st of last year.
Okay. Just about a year ago.
Just about a year ago. Wow, Hunter, we did it one episode probably like every 10 days.
Yeah.
This is our 36th episode? Something like that? 35th?
Something like that.
That's crazy. Wow. Well, let's get back to what we do on this podcast.
Which is raise a glass. And I've got to know what's in your glass, Eric.
Well, Hunter, half an hour ago when we started this podcast, I had iced coffee. Now there is a melted layer of water on top. So let me just drink that off first, and then I'll tell you about it. Yep, that was pretty much just melted ice. So I have brought a Colombian decaf coffee from New City Cafe. I made this yesterday for an event that I will share about shortly. And I have in it an oat cinnamon bun creamer. And it is in a glass that was given to me just under 5 years ago when I got married. And it is a glass with that at the time, prior to it being in the dishwasher, too many times, had a map of Hamilton College.
All right.
It's really good. Hunter, what is in your glass? What are you going to be racing tonight?
Well, I have a Second Fiddle double IPA by Fiddlehead Brewing Company, and I'm doing a live pour for that only Eric can see.
Is that a real thing? Do people talk about doing a live pour?
I have no idea.
That sounded legitimate. And I was like, wow, it's a live pour.
Probably. We do everything live nowadays. I don't want to even know half the stuff they do on Twitch. Really underestimated how long this would take. I'm going to have to stop there because it's fizzing up. Here we go. That's just the head of the beer because it fizzed up quite a bit. Here we go. That is a serious pine coney IPA.
Ooh, pine coney.
Yeah, it's my favorite kind. I don't really go in for the fruities. I like the ones that taste like trees.
How often do you consume trees? I have to know. I'm sure this is a question our listeners have been wondering about for a year now. What is your tree consumption rate, Hunter?
Do IPAs count? A couple times a week, I guess.
How do you know what a tree tastes like? Please tell that information to us.
I mean, if you've ever had a classic IPA, it smells like a pine tree, like a pine cone.
It smells like a pine tree.
And whenever I drink it, I feel like I'm drinking a pine tree. And I grew up near the Adirondacks and did a lot of camping, really loved going outside. So it brings back a lot of those memories. I just feel like the taste is in my bones.
The taste is in my bones. Man, I've missed this. It's been a few weeks since we've done it. But I just heard a little for you. It smells like a pine. Nope. It smells like a pine tree. It smells like a pine tree.
And it tastes like one, too. We like to be a little indulgent on our finale episodes.
I realized that I've had all of my instruments be behind me this entire podcast, and I've never picked them up and played. I'm wondering if it might be cool to have a little bit of live music, if it'll translate in the podcast.
I think we'd have to figure out the microphone situation to get it good. But
okay.
yeah,
I mean,
great.
Might have a direct in that I could probably get from here.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, if you've got good headphones on, you'll be able to hear the bass. If you don't, you won't hear a lot.
Yeah.
At all.
Oh, we could talk afterwards. I actually have an idea that might work.
I'm excited about that. Well, oh, sorry. We're not done yet.
Yes. No, I have to know what you are raising your glass or pouring it out for this week.
Well, it's been a little bit since we met. Let me just think about. I don't really have anything that I'm necessarily pouring one out for right now. I'm just reminded, just the specific time and place when we're talking. Like, there's some terrible fires raging across our world, both physical fires and fires in the sense of wars and fights and verbal conflicts. And so I kind of was feeling a little bit of the weight of that today. But what I'm excited to raise a glass to is I'm going to raise a glass to my neighborhood. We've got just some rock star neighbors. My wife and I have lived here for just about 2 years. We live in the city of Rochester, and we didn't get to know too many of our neighbors in the first year and a half we've been here. We got to know our neighbors directly on either side of us, but this spring into summer, we've gotten to meet a lot of neighbors through gardening. And we decided we were going to set up a small like block party. And I've heard a lot of people talk about it. And so we said, okay, we've got one date left in the calendar. We're just going to decide. And so we invited neighbors. We went around door to door with one of our other neighbors, knocking on doors and inviting people to a planning session for it, and sharing kind of the date of the event. And then yesterday, Hunter, there were about 15 people. There were more than 15 people in our front yard, not including us, gathering around talking about a block party. Most people didn't know more than 50% of the people in the circle.
Wow.
And it was really exciting. We got another message today about somebody else that wants to be involved. And so just think
Awesome.
there's a lot of opportunities from there. Like I said, I love my neighbors. I love loving my neighborhood. Um,
Mm,
and it just feels like a really kind of exciting spot to be in right now.
awesome.
Yeah. Hunter, how about you? What are you raising one and pouring one out for?
Um, I am raising a glass to my wonderful wife, Kim, who is just the smartest person I know. She has shaped this podcast probably more than most people realize, just in terms of because she has shaped me so much and my taste and for the better.
That's true.
Um, yeah, and also just because she works so hard, and I got COVID, I
Mm,
guess 2 weeks ago, and so she had to take care of me and the kids, uh, and I had to quarantine. Thankfully, they did not get it somehow. I have no idea how. I got it. It was pretty rough for the first couple days for me, but Kim really did so much, and she continues to do so much. So I'm raising a glass to her.
mm,
Um, and I am pouring one out for the tragedy of the commons, or in this case, the tragedy of the Vermont Country Store in Brattleboro, Vermont, because my wife and I and our kids we were traveling back from a vacation in northern Vermont, and we decided, it's like a 4-hour drive with two young children. We'll break it up in the middle with like a nice lunch in Vermont, some nice Vermont place. And there's this deli place, Vermont Country Deli / store. And we pulled in, and it was absolutely swamped with people. Both parking lots were full. They had a market and a deli. Both parking lots were full. I felt like I was in New York City trying to park, and I was in Brattleboro, Vermont.
have you tried to park in New York City?
Oh yes, just recently we went
Okay.
to Brooklyn, and I
Just
parked in
clarify
Brooklyn.
that that's not just an exaggeration. That's
Yeah, yeah. So I miraculously found a spot. Someone pulled out, and I snagged it. But
nice.
then we walked into the deli to get a sandwich because they might make really nice deli sandwich, and there was a huge line, and my like low estimate was that it would have taken us about 40 minutes to get to the desk to get to the counter to order a sandwich. So I walked in the store and I said, "Oh, we're in the bad place." Because I'm not going to wait 40 minutes with two young children to get a sandwich in a
Mm-mm.
crowded deli. And I'm sure it's a really nice deli.
Mm-hmm.
The food that people had looked great, but it was I was expecting rest and, a
Mm-hmm.
nice break and good food, and we ended up just, eating some snacks. Um,
Would you say that at that moment you were in a crowd of thousands?
uh, maybe not quite thousands.
Do you know that musical,
Which one is that?
Anastasia?
Oh, no.
Oh, such a good one. Such a good
I
one.
mean, I've seen it, but
It's the
not
best
well
song
enough
from it.
to.
So it's okay. I get it.
Okay.
You don't like anything I like. It's
That's not true. Because we're talking about something that we both like.
No, we both love this.
Yeah.
Mm. Well, Hunter, I interrupted your pouring one out. Is there more to that story?
Not really. No.
Great. In that case, let's dive into it. I honestly am not sure exactly where this episode is going to go, because as you've gathered, dear listener, by now, Hunter and I both went to a college named after the founding father without a father who got a lot farther by working a lot harder. At 14,
By
they put
being
him
a
in
lot
charge.
smarter.
That's true. That's true. At 14, they put him in charge of a trading charter. And so the idea of Hamilton has compounded layers of meanings in our mind, in our souls, in our
Mhm.
relationships with each other, in our relationships with our other friends and both of our spouses in different ways. My wife did not go to Hamilton, but I shared moments with her on the Hill, including at your wedding. Actually, we were
Mhm.
reminiscing about that recently, um,
Mm.
and our podcast is named after a song you have so lovingly heard. At least our version of, or some version of our version of. I'm not exactly sure what was decided as the final cut. Because the first 30 minutes was us jabbing at it, trying to get something going.
Yeah.
um, and so it's very hard for me, and I think for us, to talk about Hamilton the musical without talking about Hamilton the college, because I strongly believe that if we had gone to, say, Amherst or Middlebury, just naming other NESCAC schools, or whatever community college or SUNY school, we would have been much slower to the game of Hamilton, and
Mm.
it probably wouldn't mean as much to us.
Probably not. Definitely not. Do we have to introduce Hamilton the musical?
I feel like if you at this point have not listened to or watched Hamilton the musical on Disney Plus, or just listen to it on Spotify, I'm not sure what's holding you back.
Mm.
If there is something holding you back, I hope this episode helps kind of open up the door for you. I know people who I dearly love and care about, who have decided that Hamilton is not for them because they utterly despise and hate all rap music and think it's the worst thing ever. And I have told them that they're making an uninformed decision. Um, and as it's had such an impact on our culture.
Mhm.
And I was just listening to one of my favorite songs right before the episode, and like there's a version of it that the former U.S. President Barack Obama, is part of. And before Hamilton the musical ever started, it was performed at two different places. One at the White House, in what has become a pretty famous series of video of some of the songs, and the other one was for the bicentennial of Hamilton College in
Mm.
2012. Before this musical came out, our mascot for our college was a pig in a Continental Soldier uniform. They called him Al Ham. After the musical, our mascot was rebranded as Alexander Hamilton.
Mhm.
The first place I ever heard this musical, anything from this musical, was at our, is it convocation? Is that the first day?
Oh.
The former president of Hamilton College, a French professor who became president, who is the last person you'd expect to start, or at least that visually that you'd expect to start,
Yeah.
to know this
Jody?
musical.
Joan?
Yep,
What's
Joan. Yep, yeah.
Joan?
Joan Hines Stewart, right?
Yeah.
Um, I remember her stepping up to the microphone and saying, "How does a bastard orphan son of a whore and a Scotsman dropped in the middle of a forgotten spot in the Caribbean, impoverished and squalor, grow up to be a hero and a scholar? The $10 founding father without a father got a lot farther by working a lot harder, by being a self-starter." And I was like, what is happening? But it was still, for me, 2 or 3 years before I really gave Hamilton a chance.
Mm.
And that was shortly before, right around the time it was going on Broadway. And so I will stop there. That's just a little bit of an introduction to it. But our relationship with Hamilton, which has clearly done so much for us, we've shared on this episode, in this podcast before, like how we met each other, through Hamilton.
Mm-hmm.
And, Hunter met his wife.
Met my wife.
Many of other friends. We were pushed in directions that are still impacting our lives. We both have given, maybe the Dansons a little more regularly than I have, to the college, and supported various. I have a piece of the Hamilton College Chapel in my house with the Hamilton logo branded on it. I have a finger puppet of Alexander Hamilton and a huge Hamilton chair and a bobblehead of Alexander Hamilton from another time I've given. Like, it is very clear to people when they walk into my house what college I came from, and the way in which I think we both talk about our college is very different from the way that many other people talk about their colleges. And yet, I will say for myself, I feel like I'm in a little bit of a love-hate relationship with our college right now.
Yeah.
It's going to take a while for me to feel like there's been any healing to it.
Mm-hmm.
I've spoken a lot. I want to give you a chance to say things, or maybe kind of bring the conversation forward here.
Yeah, I think we would be remiss not to mention how we have most recently what has happened with Hamilton, which I think has really challenged me, because I don't think I've questioned my quote unquote loyalty to Hamilton as much in the past years. But it was something that caused me to cancel my donation. I just had a monthly, and I canceled it because Hamilton, it sounded like it was like one person who made the decision, but they decided to fire the chaplain, Jeff McCarn, who has been there for over
27
27 years. Yeah. And, Jeff was a huge part, like, of our time at Hamilton.
I don't think you can understate how.
Yeah,
I don't
like,
think you
we
can
met at
overstate
the
it.
retreat that Jeff organized. I met Kim at the retreat that Jeff organized. And he's really like the spiritual heart of the campus.
Mm-hmm.
And they just summarily dismissed him somehow. And it's because he doesn't have tenure. It's not a tenured position. And I also didn't know this, that they ended the posse program
Yeah, in
in
Boston.
2018.
Just the
Yeah,
Boston one. They have some of the other ones
just
still.
the posse. Okay.
I think some of the Miami ones going.
Um,
I read that in the article too. I was like, what in the world?
yeah. and Posse was a program that encouraged diversity on the campus. It allowed students from less privileged backgrounds to go to Hamilton, and it just kind of stinks. It's um, and yet, I look back really fondly at my time at Hamilton. It was really challenging and difficult, but I learned a lot, and it pushed me academically and spiritually, and has really, shaped me into who I am today, and the writer that I am.
Oh yeah.
Do you have more that you want to say before we go into the next?
Let me say this. I just want to take a moment to just lift up Jeff McCarn, because he is one of the greatest people I have ever met, and got the chance to be with a mentor in my life. I knew him before I really knew Hamilton College, through a sibling who had attended there. I think it's safe to say that at least a few of the major steps I've taken in my life have been because of his influence. Like I did my first residency with a pastor, and he was the one that helped pay for that through the chaplaincy program. Did a huge, we went to a huge conference in St. Louis with 15 other members of Hamilton through Jeff's voice and financial guidance. I made the decision to pursue a Master's of Divinity degree at few specific colleges because I knew that is what Jeff did to become a college chaplain, and I chose the university that he went to, as well as a couple other that were in the same type of boat, and spent a year as a college chaplain in that program. And was actually in the midst of discussing with him a time to come to the Hill to talk about my current work with refugees to current Hamilton students, through the chaplaincy office. And you said it, he was kind of the spiritual heart of the campus. I would say he was even more than that. I think in many ways he was like a moral. In addition to that, I think he was also a moral and ethical heart of the campus. A voice helping us remember. A lot of the services and larger events he held on the campus were about remembering the past, and about holding on to the pain of that, and then also giving the space to discuss it and to move forward. I think of the remembrance of 9/11. It's a big one that comes to my mind every year, and the candlelight services. I could go on. I know we both could go on. We could make an entire episode about him.
I mean, just the Sunday chapel services that he did every Sunday. I'll never forget what he said about how when he would bake the bread for the communion, and he talked about how he would always, cut a cross in the top of the bread, as you do with bread, and the analogy of that to the flesh of Christ being broken for us.
I don't remember that. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I mean, so that really has shaken us. I think it's safe to say, and I know our relationship with Hamilton will strengthen again over the coming years, but I feel like it might take years actually, um, because I can't think of a reason why, and the different pieces we've read as far as like the reasons why just aren't reasons. A change of direction is the
Yeah.
language used, and so if anybody from Hamilton is listening to this, we love you guys. Feel free to reach out to us if you're feeling challenged or pained about that, or um, you know, it's. I know it might not seem big in the scope of everything happening in our world, but relationships are important, and we can't lose the importance of a single life, because that will help hold us to every life,
Mm.
and the beauty of each and every one of us. So Hamilton, the musical. When do you remember first interacting with this musical in a way that goes beyond uh, the voice of our college president?
I don't have a specific memory. I just know that I started listening to it at some point. Um, I think it was right around when they were considering removing Hamilton from the $10 bill. Um,
Oh, yeah, that was such a big deal.
I was really upset about that
Me too.
because he literally created the bank. Like, there would not be a bank in a U.S. currency without Alexander Hamilton. And they wanted to do it to add more diversity to our currency, which, yes, I'm all for that. But Alexander Hamilton was an immigrant from the Caribbean, and the Treasury Secretary, and I think they ended up removing Andrew Jackson, which I kind of hate that guy. But uh, I have a specific memory listening to Hamilton.
2024. Sorry. In 2024, Harriet Tubman will be the face on every newly printed $20 bill.
Yeah. All right. Can't wait. Can't wait to stop seeing Andrew Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew Jackson's face.
He's garbage. But
But I have a specific memory. I don't even know when. I was just walking past the chapel listening to Hamilton on my headphones. And I think it was the first moment. I think I remember it because it was the moment where it really clicked, where because Hamilton really opened. It was the gateway to musicals for me,
hmm.
because my previous exposure to musicals was Disney, and I was not the kind of person to start loving musicals because of Disney musicals, especially because there were a few friends in my youth group who used to taunt me with Disney musicals and play them purposely because they knew that I wasn't crazy about them. Um,
What, Hunter? I thought you loved musicals. Such a surprise to me.
yeah, so I would have described myself as someone who did not enjoy musicals until Hamilton, and which is, a testament, I think, to Hamilton, because I was not a huge fan of rap. I'm still not the biggest fan of it. I appreciate it more now, partly because of Hamilton and also 21 Pilots. But that's one of my earliest memories, and it was just like everyone on campus was listening to Hamilton. At it was really, you know, I that's why we said it wouldn't mean as much to us if we hadn't gone to Hamilton. And it came out while we were going to Hamilton. So it was like,
Mm-hmm.
it
2015.
really was, yeah, one of those like once in a lifetime things that we were able to be a part of.
People have applied to Hamilton College because of the musical. Like it
Yeah.
blew up. Like we have classmates that went to like some of the opening showings on Broadway because they were studying in New York City at that time.
Lucky them.
Let me, Hunter, for me, I I don't have a great memory. That's not something that I have as but I have a very visual memory. And so I remember things as I share and I see them. And I distinctly remember where I was when I listened to the Hamilton album for the first time. It was our senior year. I was on the third floor of Sadov Student Center, sitting in front of one of the windows, looking over the mailroom. Sitting at a table, looking over the mailroom through one of the windows. What had become my favorite space to work on my capstone thesis, my independent thesis. And I turned on the musical with the thought that I could listen to it as I was working. Very quickly realized that was not the case. Primarily because I was so fascinated and so enthralled by the music that there was no reason for me I couldn't do anything else. And I'm pretty sure I sat there for 2 hours and 22 minutes listening to the music before I did anything else, or I listened to at least the first half of it. It was amazing. And it really, I mean, I've always loved musicals. But it really, I think it opened my eyes to a different genre of music, genres, and it brought, and it continues to this, it brings history to life in a way that is really unparalleled, I think. I think Lin-Manuel Miranda is one of the greatest musical minds or music minds like that has lived. I think that, like, I mean, the idea that he was on vacation reading the story of Alexander Hamilton that you have in front of you. How many pages is it? 600? 400?
Oh, it's like 700.
700 pages. He was sitting there. He picked it up because somebody had it at the Airbnb or whatever he was saying. And he read it and he's like, this would make a great musical. What?
Yeah, Ron Chernow's Alexander Hamilton biography. I just went and watched the original, or one of the original performances of like the first song in Hamilton by Lynn, and it was at like the Washington Poetry Slam or something. And he looks so young. And he's like, at the beginning, he's like, I am making a hip hop concept album about one of our most important founding fathers, Alexander Hamilton. And they laughed. People laughed. And that the reaction of everyone in the crowd, including Obama, they were just laughing mostly. It was very like polite and respectful laughing. You could see some people getting into it, but it was like, I think we take it for granted now. That Hamilton is a blockbuster. But when Lynn was writing it, it was really just there wasn't really anything like it.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, I've read Ron Chernow's biography, and I could definitely see how Lynn was inspired. And you can see a lot of like the source of the musical in it. But having the source is one thing, and being able to turn it into a musical that flows, that tells the story, that does everything that Hamilton does is just takes so much talent and hard work. and and it's funny to watch that performance because Lynn he doesn't have a great singing voice. He's definitely improved, um, but he still doesn't have like a naturally classically good singing voice. And you can really hear in that performance, like his voice cracks. He's a little off sometimes, but what really is the meat of Hamilton are the lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Oh my goodness.
and
Oh my goodness.
it's like, it never gets old. I went back and I was like, I've listened to Hamilton so countless times, countless times.
There's a way to track how
And
many times I've listened to it.
yeah, and every time I go back to listen to it again, I'm like, I'm listening to Hamilton again. And then, within like 5 seconds, who I am trying to rap. And as much as I appreciate rap, I know that I will never ever be able to convincingly rap. I am just too too white and too you know I could sing, but I could sing blues, but I just can't. It doesn't sound good
Your body
coming
was
out of my
built for
mouth.
blues. You were a
That's true.
person built for blues.
Yeah.
When you go outside of it, you're good, but you're not incredible. When you're in blues, like you are incredible.
Thank
So
you. Thank you. Um, but that's like I'm just whenever I start listening to it again, I'm right there in it. Um, it, um, I yield. I yield to you.
I just came across this, so I was just found the book on Alexander Hamilton that I still haven't read. It's embarrassing, but I haven't read it. But I got it for Christmas, I think. Because inside of it, this was Christmas in 2017. Inside of it was this.
Hmm.
It was the tickets for seeing Hamilton the musical in Chicago, because it was in Chicago for, I don't know, 8 years. And my wife and I lived there for a time, and
Hmm.
we went on March 27th, 2018. The I don't know the names of any of the actors. There were a couple of the people who was there. Was their understudy performing? The guy who played Hamilton was actually, I think the guy who played Hamilton and the guy who played Aaron Burr were both understudies.
Hmm.
The guy who played Hamilton was like 5'8", maybe 5, like tops, probably 5'8". And the guy who played
Yeah.
Hamilton, was 5'8", and the guy who played Aaron Burr was like 6'5". And at one point, and I can't remember the specific point, it was somewhere in the second half, I think. Like he did a short joke, like an implied short joke on the
Oh,
stage,
nice.
and it was hilarious. But
Nice.
it was the first time I'd ever seen the show. So
Hmm.
about 2+ years into listening to Hamilton, already knowing the music, forwards, backwards, inside out, pretty much. I'd never seen it. And one of the things I've learned about myself is I am, this is probably not the correct wording for it, but I'm like voice blind, in the sense of, if I am listening to a song and cannot visualize the people singing it, I will hear pretty much any male and pretty much any female voice as being the same. So there's male voices and there's female voices. And so there are so many songs I didn't understand until I saw, like, Dear Theodosia. I was like, why is Alexander Hamilton singing to this person, Theodosia? Like, I thought he was having a daughter. Well, who's singing that song? Aaron Burr.
Hmm.
These different pieces that I couldn't understand what was happening in this musical,
Hmm.
just listening to it, because I couldn't distinguish the voices, even though the voices are very distinguishable. Like, it's very obvious when Lin-Manuel Miranda is singing versus Leslie Odom Jr. versus Daveed Diggs. versus you name whoever it is you want to. Christopher Jackson. Oh my goodness. Whew. I could keep going. The stage for Hamilton is brilliant. There's like 16 people, like tops, in the musical. It is there's a word for it, and I always get the word wrong. It's not. I always think musical opera. That's not what it is. But there's a word for it, or an operetta, or something like that. There are maybe like less than 5 minutes of spoken lines in this entire musical.
Sung through musical.
Is that what it is?
I think so.
And it's amazing because what you're listening to on the track is what you see. In fact, if you're listening to the CD version of, if you listen to it on CD, it actually is slower at times than in the musical because the CD takes a half second to switch between songs, and the musical doesn't. Like there are a couple. I remember listening to the CD. There are a couple breaks, and it'll be like, I am not throwing away my shot. And I'd be like,
Yeah.
where's that break? And then the musical is like, oh, it just keeps going. Like, I don't know how they can keep doing this. And the stage is kind of, there's a second tier where people are standing, like kind of looking out over the middle. And then in the middle of it, where, just regular ground, it spins like, it's like a record. They can control the direction of the spin as well, which is actually, it's very similar concept to Hadestown. Hadestown definitely took a lot of its ideas for what the stage would look like from Hamilton. But the way they use that, especially with things like the 10 dual commandments and like slowing the movement and walking backwards, it's wicked.
Good one. Yeah, I had seen the bootleg way back when, but you can't really see it in the bootleg. It's just, some person hiding a camera in their bag, hiding their phone in their bag or whatever. So you don't really get it's not really worth it to watch, honestly. The first time I actually saw it was the Disney Plus special.
Which is really well done.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I wish every Broadway musical would get that,
right?
At some point.
Have you seen the Newsies version one? Have you seen the Newsies?
No.
Oh, the Newsies on Disney Plus is great too. Sorry.
Yeah. Because like I know that they probably think that, I don't really know, but my guess would be they don't do it because they want people to come to the theater. But like, my wife and I, we're not going to go to it's like, it takes a lot to go to the city and pay for the tickets and everything. And I just think,
and you actually might be more likely to do it if you,
yeah,
right? Musicals are the type of
yeah.
thing that when you watch them, it makes you want to rewatch them.
Right.
Like, let's use Come From Away, one of the greatest musicals of all time, which hopefully we'll discuss in a future season. Like, if you listen to that music and if you see it, you want to watch it again and again and again and again.
Yeah.
But Hunter, you've been able to see it live too now, right?
Yes, I did. We did see it in Hartford. It came to Connecticut, and we were able to go to Hartford, and that was actually my first time and my wife's first time. My sister and my mom came too, and it was all of our first time seeing it live. And it was good. We had like kind of far seats. It was fulfilling to see it. I don't remember the cast that well. I don't remember their names. I remember whoever played Angelica Schuyler was a standout, I think, for me. in terms of the cast. Um, and I rewatched the Disney Plus one for this episode, and
Oh, perfect.
um, I was blown away by the choreography, um, especially on Rewind. There, the
Mm-hmm.
Rewind song where I think it's called, the title is Satisfied.
Yeah.
Um, but it's Angelica's
A
song.
toast to the
Yeah.
to the
Um,
bride from your sister,
rewind,
who's always
rewind,
by your
wind, wind.
side. To your union,
And
to the union, to the
they do the whole marriage
revolution.
song in sequence where Alexander Hamilton is sending letters to Eliza and talking to his dad and getting permission to marry her, and then getting married and everything. I think it's called Winter's Ball.
Mm-hmm.
And then they do the sequence, but they do it backwards, and they all end up in the same spots. Like on the stage, they do it forwards when Hamilton is courting Eliza, and then they do it backwards, but they do it really naturally when Angelica is talking about um, how she feels about everything that's going on, because she has feelings for Hamilton, and um, so she's like commenting on how she is feeling in the same moments where you have just witnessed, um, you know, Hamilton courting Eliza. Like, she's in the exact same spot, I'm pretty sure, where she is when Hamilton is sending letters. Peggy brings a letter over, and Eliza opens it. Yeah, and Angelica says, like, I'm just saying, if you really loved me, you would share him. Um, except in the Satisfied song, she's um, talking about her feelings and everything else, and it's it blew me away. um, and the rest of the choreography in the song is also, in the musical, is just so good. It's just like, honestly, I've seen some other musicals, and I mean, great. Most recently, my wife and I saw Hadestown. That's why we went to the city, um, also to see friends and family. But uh,
Be honest. Wouldn't have gone if Hadestown wasn't there.
and of course, Hadestown is phenomenal,
Did you get
but
chills
it's
listening to Hades? Did his voice like
nah.
resonate in your soul?
Oh,
Like I talked about.
it was a good voice, but I you know me, I like Orpheus
Mm-hmm.
um, better than Hades at this point. So
Mm-hmm.
I was just totally starstruck because it was actually the actors who played Orpheus and Eurydice in the original,
Really?
still playing Orpheus and Eurydice.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
it was
Oh, that would
actually
have been amazing.
Reeve Carney and even Nobilizada. So when they came on the stage, I was just like totally floored.
I would have loved to hear it "Wait for Me" sung by.
Oh, even Nobilizada like totally owns the stage in Hadestown. Like, because you could hear her acting. It wasn't the same as the recording. Like, she was still acting and doing a little differently than the recordings. So it was anyway. But Kim came down to watch Hamilton with me the other night when I was rewatching it, and she was like, "Yeah, I could see how this would blow people away, um, just because you have the lyrics, which are just it's amazing, and then all the choreography and everything else comes up to match it."
It is. Hamilton is very easy. The words are very easy to follow. Sorry, the words are very clear. It is probably worth listening to a couple times before you watch it, or to watch it with subtitles for the first time, so you can catch the words. Just because so many of them are spoken so quickly, which is part of the beauty of hip hop, um, rap is that. But being able to catch the words is really I've heard people that are just kind of felt like it was unapproachable
Hmm.
because of that. But you're talking about the different choreography in it we love, and I think one of the best parts about the choreography is when you get to the various pieces that the king does. Because as soon as in those moments we go from this like beautifully choreographed like whole like cast interaction to a message from the king, a message from the king. And he walks out, and it's absurd and it's hilarious, and the different actors portray him differently, and it's great.
When push comes to shove.
And he just stands there, and like one or two of them, he'll like lift his robes and he'll like move his legs a little bit, but outside of that, there's like no movement. And so yes, and the shoulders too, yes. And so the every the visual aspect of the show parallels and correlates perfectly with the verbal aspect of it, and it
Mhm.
just creates this incredible dichotomy between the king, and the great, the British and the revolutionaries, and the new country being set up. But Hunter, um, when you are thinking about Hamilton but don't have time to listen to the entire show, which songs do you come back to, whether it be in your mind or in your listening?
I come back to the first one, and I think it's the second to last one.
The world was wide
After
enough
Burr shoots Hamilton, the world was wide enough.
for both
Yeah,
Hamilton and me. Okay, why? Why are those what you go to?
because I think for me, Hamilton does so many things. I think the thing that I keep coming back to, and the reason that my wife and I we like to rewatch Hamilton on the 4th of July every year.
That's great.
Because I think you said it brings history to life in an unparalleled way. Um, and my favorite moment in the whole musical is when Burr, after he shoots Hamilton, he looks at the audience and he just kind of presents himself holding the gun, and he says, "Now I'm the villain in your history," because it it breaks the fourth wall in such a beautiful way. And you've seen this building throughout the musical. Um, and I think the real turning point is the room where it happens, both for Burr's character and also in breaking the fourth wall with the audience, in inviting the audience into politics and our current political situation, current at the time and also current now, is the fact that none of us, the vast majority of us, except for like a select few, are not in the room where politics happens. Dark as a tomb where it happens, and Burr is singing about this meeting between Hamilton and Jefferson and Madison, but he's also singing about America now. Um, we don't want to know how the sausage gets made, and so I come back to the beginning song, which um, I think I come back to that one because it so effectively remembers Hamilton.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's a perfect opening to song.
Yeah, yeah, and it's just tells so much about Hamilton's story, in such an effective way, in such a gripping way, and a rhythmic way that just bumps. You just start, you know,
Just bump.
jamming to it, moving your head. It's like, um, if if Joni could rap it, like it's got some, it's got a beat. It's got a dirty beat. Um, I love the way that Hamilton invites the audience into, the real story of our nation, something that's more realistic, um, than speeches and orations. Which, it's not that speeches aren't unimportant, but there's a lot behind those. Um,
Yes.
and of course, I also think about the final moment of the song, which the final moment of the musical, which I never really knew about because I'd never seen it until I had seen the Disney Plus one, where Eliza, at the very last thing that she does, she gives this kind of gasp, and it's not really clear what she's looking at. She says, and that's the end. And the only insight that I have into this is, I think, is like Lynn. When I used to be on Twitter, I saw Lynn retweet someone else's tweet about how this moment is Eliza sort of seeing, because her struggle, afterwards, after Hamilton dies, is to tell Hamilton's story. Who tells your story? Um, and she is finally seeing in this moment that Hamilton's story has been told,
Mm.
um, which is just beautiful, because especially when you read the biography too, like Hamilton really, he really gets done dirty by America. All of his political opponents, um, he gives them plenty of ammunition and plenty of reasons to hate him, of course. Uh, but they take advantage of his death to rake his name through the mud. And Eliza lives 50 years after he dies and tries to not necessarily clear his name, but tell his whole story, um, and kind of give him his rightful place among the founding fathers. And this musical finally did that. Um,
That's
so
beautiful.
that's what I love about it, and that's what I keep coming back to, and it also just kind of inspires me to have a little bit of hope for politics in America, um, to at least get involved in even the smallest way.
Hmm.
Um, what about you?
I have listened to one song in this show more than probably, maybe more than every other song combined. It's probably too audacious of a thing to say, but I come back to One Last Time. Like that is,
Mm.
it's one of my favorite songs, and it's the song of um, President George Washington calling Alexander Hamilton into his office and having him help him craft his farewell address to the nation. Um, and there's probably multiple levels, at least a couple of major levels over why I come back to it. The first is I love power ballads. You give me a musical or an album, especially a heavier metal album, probably 7, 8 out of 10 times, my favorite song will be the or one of the power ballads in it. This is like a power ballad of a song. It's very much like takes a step back, but like is um if I'm gonna dive deeper into it, past the beauty of Christopher Jackson's voice, which is just he's got an incredible voice, and one of the things that broke my heart when I was watching it live is the actor who's playing Washington. His voice broke during One Last Time, and it was like it was the reason, like the top of my list of like what I wanted to like see live. And so there was like that kind of like broke my heart a
Mm.
little bit. Um,
Yeah.
But the other piece is something that you brought up in maybe it was last episode or one of the last couple episodes, about the farewell address. And I do not know Washington's farewell address. I do not read it like you do, on a regular basis, a yearly basis. But the precedence, and the wisdom with which George Washington imparts, and the humility. I think there's a humility in this as well,
Oh
or
yeah.
at least the relinquishing of power, which I think involves humility, is stunning, because he had, if anybody in the history of America could have run for 5 presidencies straight without there being an issue, it's George Washington.
Could have done 10,
Yeah,
probably.
he could have done. I mean, he might have lived longer if he didn't stop working. I don't know, but he chose to relinquish his spot. And I mean, maybe he knew his health was ailing him. He didn't live that long after resigning
I
as
think
president. I don't
so.
think he did. And you know, faith was clearly a part of his life. I've been recently trying to think through what does it mean in my mind to be American. I'm having some challenges trying to figure that out. I mean, part of it is just working with so many newly welcomed individuals to America, who had a lot of expectations for what our country would be, but they're not met. And then I also think, and I know we're not a political podcast. One of the versions of the song I really enjoy is with former President Barack Obama. He will start, he starts, though in reviewing the incidents of my administration, I am unconscious of intentional error. I am nevertheless too sensible of my defects not to think it probable that I may have committed many errors. I shall also carry with me the hope that my country will view them with indulgence, and that after 45 years of my life dedicated to its service, it just kind of continues on. It's just, teach him how to say goodbye, you and it resonates in my soul in a way that I can't communicate.
I think the moment in that song, no matter how many times I've heard it, in the very least, I start to choke up when I hit this moment, is when Washington says, like the scripture says, everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. They'll be safe in the nation we've made.
I want to sit under my own vine and fig tree, a moment alone in the shade, at home in this nation we've made.
Because that's the real American dream. That you can sit under your own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make you afraid.
I was reading something today, and I wish I'd brought it home. I didn't. But it was pretty much a statement of welcome from President George Washington to the nations to bring to welcome others to our country. And I am fully understanding the fact that our country was of the sins of our country, right? The
Right.
only reason we could have a quote unquote free land is because of the systemic oppression and killing of native people, and then of the trafficking, the forced migration, human trafficking of 645,000 enslaved Africans. And like that brokenness, that sin is not lost in this musical either.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I think helped Hamilton as a musical continue to grow, and that I actually quite enjoyed, is the Hamilton mixtape. Hunter, I don't know if you've spent much time listening to it,
Not too much.
but I was just re-listening to a song. There's a Cabinet Battle 3 demo
Mm-hmm.
that was released that's about the issue of slavery in America.
Mm.
And it's fascinating and it's beautiful and it's challenging, and it's heartbreaking kind of where it lands on. And there are others. You brought up a little bit ago one of my favorite songs, and that's "Satisfied."
Mm.
That's another song I just love. I love the story it tells. Kind of breaks my heart, and because I know what's coming, and all of these pieces. And there's a song on the mixtape that is sung by Eliza, not Angelica, as the in response to the whatever song it is where she's like talking about like the world has no right to our bed or our house, like I'm burning.
Burn.
Yeah, burn. There's a song called Congratulations, which you have to have heard. I don't know. But the premise of it is, congratulations, you've invented a new kind of stupid and open all the cages in the zoo kind of stupid. Like, and it's a song of Eliza. I think it's primarily Eliza singing to Hamilton about how stupid, and maybe it's Angelica. I think it's Eliza, but about like the idiocy of not only the affair, but then the Reynolds pamphlets after that.
Mm-hmm. You ever seen somebody ruin their own life?
His poor wife.
I love that the king gets in on the never gonna be president now.
Never gonna be president now.
I didn't know that because I hadn't seen it. And then the king is walking around throwing papers around. Never going to be president now. Never going to be president.
We spent time listening to the song Hurricane.
Yeah, I mean,
I feel like it's an undervalued song in this show.
Yeah,
it's such a moving song, and it's you almost feel like he's in a sane place, but clearly he does an insane act following it. But like, it also like it does a really good job of kind of putting into perspective for probably the third time in the show, like Alexander Hamilton's life and kind of what led him to this moment, and like the thing that he has always had to protect him is his writing.
Yeah, Ron Chernow in the biography, he says that Hamilton must have scratched out the maximum number of words that a person could write in 47 or 49 years. There's some dispute about Hamilton's birth date, whether it's 55 or 57, I think. But Hamilton wrote like he was running out of time. Like it's kind of incredible. One of my favorite songs is actually "The Farmer Refuted," which is the debate between Hamilton and Samuel Seabury. Samuel Seabury is a Tory who is urging them to stay with Britain and not rebel.
Heed not the rabble who scream revolution. They have not your interests at heart.
My God, tear this dude apart.
Chaos and bloodshed are not a solution. Don't let them lead you astray. This Congress does not speak for me.
My dog speaks more eloquently
Play
than
a
thee.
dangerous game.
Your mange is the
I
same.
pray the king shows you his mercy. For
Is he in Jersey?
shame, for shame.
Yeah, so that song is actually based on um, a series of articles that were written back and forth. Samuel Seabury published something about a farmer or something about why they should not seed from Britain, why it's dangerous. Hamilton's first response was 35 pages long. It was his first rebuttal. And then Samuel Seavery published a response to that. And Hamilton's second response was 87 pages long.
Where are they getting this paper?
Combined, that's like almost as long as my book. Like, and he's just refuting a farmer about politics and why not to seed from Britain. So Hamilton was so prolific. And this, writing without a word processor, writing with pen and ink, um, it's kind of staggering when you think about the numbers. Like, it was a total of 60,000 words that he wrote against Samuel Seavery. And Lynn adapts it so brilliantly in the way that they do the debate. But you've heard a very poor sample from us.
No, it's pretty good.
Not bad.
I like
Yeah,
that
it's fine.
I've been
Yeah,
working on
we'll
my
see.
Samuel Seabury voice for quite a while.
I mean, just comparing to
Okay, well, don't
the
compare
actor.
us to Broadway musicians in a
You're right.
recording
Yeah, okay.
studio. It's not a fair comparison.
That's true. But I've actually related to that song pretty hard throughout my life. I think it's impossible for anyone who writes for any amount of time, whether it's going to college or writing a novel or being a journalist or whatever. I think it's pretty hard not to relate to that song because, Hamilton talks about how he wrote his way out of poverty. Um, and that's what he's done his whole life. Um,
We're going
and
back to Hurricane. Sorry.
yeah, Hurricane, which is based on the hurricane that came to his hometown. And Hamilton wrote a letter to his father, and then I think one of his mentors saw the letter and he encouraged him to publish it, and people read it and were so impressed by it that they set up a subscription that people could donate to send him to college. So he literally wrote his way out of poverty because he had a real rough time. But I related to this song because I don't know if you experienced this at Hamilton, and this might be a good segue into more how it shaped us personally. But I experienced some pretty intense imposter syndrome at Hamilton. Um, because the people at Hamilton were just so impressive. The people who got into Hamilton in our class and other classes, just like I know I got in here somehow, but I'm here with all of these incredible, amazing people, and I'm just struggling along. I feel like I'm totally BSing it here. Um, and I'm sure that's what the vast majority of people felt as well. But I still can't see exactly how Hamilton looked at like my applications and my qualifications. Not to like demean myself, but I don't know exactly how I got in, you know? Because there were just so many incredibly impressive people with really amazing resumes and stuff. Um, and the only thing that I could think of is that it was my college essay that, you know, because I revised it a lot and stuff. And so I didn't write myself out of poverty, but I wrote myself into Hamilton, maybe. Who knows? I mean, there's a large part of college admissions that are just plain luck. So might be it. But
I've spent some time on the other side of college admissions. It is hard. It is really hard to
mm,
try and make those decisions. But one of the things Hamilton highly values or highly valued was just the desire to be at Hamilton and to be like in that space of relationship. And
mhm,
so, yeah, writing is a huge part of it. And the only additional piece that we had was write 1,000 characters of why you want to come to Hamilton. And that wasn't just for fluff. I think that mattered too.
yeah.
Sorry, I was answering a question you weren't asking.
No, it's good. So yeah, Hurricane I've come back to a lot. Um, and it's kind of ironic because it's arguably one of Hamilton's like one of the worst decisions that he ever made was to write the Reynolds pamphlet. Um, because it totally destroyed his reputation and humiliated his family. Um,
Mm-hmm. There is a moment that is not talked about in his life that I have inferred by listening to the songs. I have not read the biography. Um, there's a moment after Philip's death, right, but after Stay Alive, the song "It's Quiet Uptown" talks about him going to, it talks about his life now. There's a moment he talks about praying and going to church, things he didn't do before.
mhm,
And as I listened to this story, I remember, I think it might have been last year at some point, and the umpteenth time listening through, I kind of hit a point and I was like, I think there is a spiritual transformation that happened in Alexander Hamilton's life after the death of his son Philip. Um, and I think that not only because does it talk about him praying and going to church, um, and I'm assuming some of it has a basis in this story, but I'm also basing it off of the way he interacts in the rest of his life. And again, I'm doing this based off a musical, reading into it. That's part of my own background and things I do. But I see a change in his character.
mhm.
I see a selfishness throughout his whole life. And I think there's still kind of a moment where he dies through kind of a somewhat selfish behavior. Like the Your Obedient Servant, which is a hilarious song, and reflects like actual letters written between Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton. Um,
Mhm.
but even with that, I can't listen to this musical now, see it, and not feel that a weight has both been put on and lifted from Alexander Hamilton and Eliza following Philip's death. Not following the Reynolds pamphlets, not following these other moments, but following that. Is that something that was anywhere in the biography or that
Um,
you've like thought of before, or does it feel like I'm making that up?
I mean, it's definitely not. You're not going on nothing. It's definitely implied in the musical. Um, he says that he never used to pray. I just started rereading the biography today, so I've only gone through like the first 3 chapters, and I read it a while ago. Um, but he does mention in the beginning, towards the beginning, that Hamilton had a kind of ambivalence about going to church because they didn't treat him well in the Caribbean because he was an illegitimate child,
Mhm.
um, which I think is probably part of why he was so defensive and antagonistic and cared so much about his honor, is because he didn't have it when he was a kid, and he was really disparaged and put out and taken advantage of by almost everyone in his life. Um, but I think it's definitely there. And I, I related to that song, I think about Eliza a lot. Um, Especially on this listen around, I was thinking a lot about Eliza, and how she removes herself from the narrative. So she like destroyed her letters from Hamilton, and the song where they talk about how they're going through the unimaginable.
Mhm.
Um, and as a writer, I think one of the first rules is that you don't say things like it was too difficult to imagine, or it was, too intense for words, or something like that. Because if you're a writer, you should have the words to say it. But this is a song where I think Lynn is a good writer, and he knows when to break the rules. And he breaks that rule with this because it truly is, you know, both the death of a child and the forgiveness of Hamilton for something
Mhm.
so for uh, such a betrayal, is really not something you can imagine unless you've gone through it. Um, I have kids now, and Philip's death hits really hard,
I almost
so
I
much
wanted to
harder.
skip through it. I wanted to skip through it, but I was like, no, for the sake, I'm going to listen to it. Next time I listen
Yeah,
to it, I'm giving myself the opportunity to skip through that and through, um, yeah, the
it hits different.
Mhm.
Um, so the best that I think we can do, like that historians can do, is kind of just conjecture off the evidence. But I think there is a fair amount of evidence to say that, I mean, Hamilton was, as much as he didn't seem to like the church that much, partly because of his upbringing, he was very spiritual, and he wrote a lot of poems and things that alluded to his spiritual life. And I can't really imagine going through the death of a child and the things that all the other things Hamilton went through too, without um,
Yeah.
approach at the very least approaching God.
Mhm.
Um, and
Hunter, this might feel like maybe a little bit of a turn in our conversation. Um, and I'm sure there are many things like in every episode that we're leaving unsaid that probably kick ourselves for later, that another person would bring into the conversation. But one of the beauties of this show is the casting decisions. So this is going to be this embarrassing thing to say. When I went and watched the show in 2018 in Chicago, I knew that the casting was very purposefully, non-white actors, people who are immigrants and different pieces. I thought it was the next step further that all future renditions and future casts of Hamilton would reflect the backgrounds of the original cast. And
Oh,
so when I first watched it, I remember getting like halfway through the opening song, Alexander Hamilton, and being so confused because I was like, this character that they're trying to portray as Alexander Hamilton, like he's not Hispanic, thus like he must not be the right Alexander Hamilton. And then my brain started working, and I was like, "That's what in the world are you thinking? That's what, just what?" But I also know that there are people that, for whatever reason, were against this.
we've seen it with Rings of Power recently too.
Ugh,
The casting of Aaron Deer.
who's by far the best character in that.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Like,
come on, Ishmael Cruz Cordoba, man, that guy. He's still my man. I don't like the show, but I love
his parts are all amazing. He
love his
doesn't get enough of
character.
them. So
Yeah. Um, one way that Hamilton has shaped me is thinking about diversity in storytelling. Um, and I started to say something on our very first episode about Hamilton because I think Rings of Power came up and we were talking about how it's kind of a dumb reason not to like the show, probably the most dumb reason not to like the show. But I didn't fully develop it. And I think what I've come around to is that diversity does not detract from a story. Diversity enhances a story.
mm.
And that's what Hamilton proved. Because Hamilton wouldn't be what it is without the diversity of the cast, without them bringing their backgrounds, um, the musical stylings, how much hip hop shaped Hamilton, it shaped Lynn, and um, it really brings so much more, um, for lack of a better word, brings so much more color, so much more um, richness, and tells a story that is more true to America.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a story that has been untold about America. And like, look, Tolkien said about theater, your belief test has to be hung, drawn, and quartered. So the argument that uh, it kills your immersion to see Aaron Burr as a black man is total bogus to me because you're in a theater. You like it's you're not being tricked into thinking that you're in 1776 when you're going to watch a show. It's all stories. Um, you have to do some work with your imagination to go into it, and if you can get over prejudice or if you want to call it something else, then you can really be drawn in and discover so much more richness. And because if you just ignore it, then you're just missing out, really robbing yourself of great stories and storytellers.
I think it's important to note in this part of the conversation our country's long dualistic view of immigrants, because and I found this out in the work I'm doing, working with refugees and other immigrants and other and Americans as well. There's this dualistic piece where we celebrate our immigrant past. Right? The statement, "Oh, my grandparents came the right way and pulled themselves up by their bootstraps and did all this." Simultaneously, preventing and attacking immigration in the United States and trying to prevent it from happening. And it's this dualism. And it's also not a new thing in the United States. Here's just a quote that I was made aware of today that I just wanted to share with you. And I'll give you a chance of guessing maybe a little bit of the context. Why should Pennsylvania, founded by the English, become a colony of aliens who will shortly be so numerous as to Germanize us instead of our Anglifying them, and will never adopt our language or customs any more than they can acquire our complexion? Do you know who said that?
I don't know. John Adams?
Benjamin Franklin.
Oof.
In 1751, I think it was, made this statement about Germans immigrating to the United States before it was even the United States. Maybe it was 1781. Maybe it was after that. In the sense that he was worried about that last piece just blows my mind. Like, Germans look too different from British people. And like, we know, and we know that it is easier for the children and grandchildren of white immigrants to become integrated into American society and not seen as the other than for non-white immigrants. And I read this earlier today, and I was like, I don't understand. Like, this is so part of our past and our present. And the other day I started listening to a book called The New Reformation by Shylin, and the foreword was by a pastor, I think, a white pastor, talking about a black author who's written this book. And one of the things he was talking about his own cultural background as a white American. And he used the language which I really liked, and I can't do it justice necessarily, but it is not a loss. It is not a loss as a white man when our voice moves from being the primary privileged perspective to part of the overall cultural narrative. In fact, that is a net gain for everyone when we move from privilege to just one of many different perspectives. That's a gain. And in seeing our past and envisioning our present and future within the diversity of our country as it stands now, there's an incredible beauty to that. And it doesn't mean we should forget our history and repent of it. It doesn't mean we should necessarily celebrate our present and where we're at and how we do things now. I think both of those are too simplistic views of things. And I think that while time moves linearly, I don't think that progress always necessitates proximity to Christ. But the opportunity to see and hear from voices that are different from our own and those in our primary circles will open up the world and will open up new things in our hearts, in our minds, in our souls that we've never thought about, we've never experienced, and that we never knew we were missing.
Hmm. I never knew I was missing Leslie Odom Jr.'s sweet, sweet voice in my life. I mean, he owned this musical. Like,
this musical, it could as well be called Aaron Burr or Burr as Hamilton. I mean, even just time wise, there's so much for Aaron Burr.
oh yeah, I mean, he's kind of like the Hermes of this. He's kind of your guide throughout the musical. He's the first guy you hear from about Hamilton, and you could almost say that the musical is the story of why Burr killed Hamilton. A large part of it, at least.
We haven't named Philippa Sue, who plays Eliza, yet. We've talked about some of the things she sung, but her voice, I mean, everybody in this entire cast, but the emotion that she carries, especially in Burn, is like, it is palpable. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
it's one of those things that just
Yeah,
strikes you. It's like a physical blow.
yeah. Daveed Diggs.
Oh, the speed with which he can rap is second to, it's phenomenal. It's
Uh-huh.
I mean,
Yeah, like Lafayette's progression is so awesome. And
what did I
I think I watched
miss? What did I miss?
the Disney Plus interview. They did like interviews with the cast however many years later. And Daveed Diggs said it was really cool to see how Lafayette progresses at the beginning. He's like, anarchy, anarchy. How you say anarchy? So he's like, he can't really like, he can't pronounce things or whatever. And then when he comes in and it's Lafayette, he has the fastest raps in the entire musical. And they're just like, I can't, I'm not even going to try.
Yeah,
but it's amazing.
well, then the second act. I mean, this is one of the cool things about Hamilton. Is four different actors change characters. I think it's four. Peggy changes, Lafayette changes, and then two others. The guy who plays Philip, he changes, and Lawrence Mulligan.
Yeah.
So all four of them change characters. It's the same actors like, but playing a different character. And I remember watching it for the first time. I caught two of them, and like my wife got one or two of them, and we didn't catch the same ones because that voice blind thing,
Yeah.
that I talked about.
Right. Yeah. No, it's John Lawrence and Philip is Anthony Ramos, and then Daveed Diggs is Lafayette and Jefferson, and then hope I pronounce it right. Okiriete Onadawan is Hercules Mulligan and Madison, which such a range. Like Hercules Mulligan and Madison are so different from each other, and he does such an amazing job. And then I was really this time around, I really loved Anthony Ramos as John Lawrence and Philip. I feel like he's just so underrated. Is especially in the Disney Plus one, he's really over the top, um, in a lot of the songs, and he's like the ultimate hype man, and he's just so much fun and brings so much energy, and just like shoots like the beginning of the song off so well.
Mhm.
And then as Philip, he's like both like really hilarious and weird,
My name is Philip.
and then just incredibly touching and heartbreaking at the
Mhm.
end.
Mm. He
Um,
plays a 9-year-old, Philip.
yeah,
Un,
I
2,
know.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
C'est
1,
8, 9,
1, 2, 3, 4,
7,
5,
8, 9,
6, 7, 8, 9.
7, 8, 9. um,
We also Jasmine Cephas Jones plays Peggy, and then she plays
yes, Mariah Reynolds.
Mariah Reynolds.
I was talking with a friend. Um, it was actually Michael, who was our guest on the Macbeth episode. Um, and I think he was quoting Billy Joel, who was talking about how the contrast between a song with sad lyrics and but that sounds happy, um, can do a lot. And the song where Hamilton is being seduced slash, you know, going his own way with Mariah Reynolds, um, is such a jam that even though what's happening in the story is so painful to see, you can't help just, Lord, teach me how to say no to this. I don't know how to say no this. You just start kind of swaying with it, and it's like, wait a minute, what's going on right now? Uh,
No.
um, and she really does a really great job as Mariah Reynolds, and Peggy. Like, I was paying attention more to Peggy this time, and Peggy's really underrated. She does a lot. Um,
And Peggy.
uh, and Peggy.
Skylar sisters. Jennifer, Peggy, Eliza.
Oh, another thing I wanted to mention was I I love one of my favorite qualities in any kind of art and an artist is restraint. Um, because I think restraint is really the key ingredient to really great things, at least the really good things that I like. And I love the way that Hamilton uses profanity. Um, and it exercises a lot of restraint, at least, you know, in hip hop, there is a lot of profanity generally. Um, but in Hamilton, there are like key moments where there's an F word, um, or something else, but they really like hit well. Um,
Mm-hmm. It's
and as
chosen because
much as
it's the best word for it, not
it
because
really
it's.
is the best word. It's not just like, you know, you can't think of anything better to say, so you just throw in the F word here or there or whatever, to try and make it more profound than it is. But like it really is in this part, like when Hercules Mullen comes out and he's like, "Get the F back up again." It's like it's a huge moment. Um, and then the part where Hamilton publishes his response to John Adams. He's like, "Sit down, John, you fat mother," and it's an actual beep in the play. It's just like beep. Um, but they're used really well to the point where I actually don't like to listen to the censored version, and I'm kind of mad about the Disney Plus version that they bleep it. Like, can you give me a version where it's unbleeped, because it really like adds a lot and is a big moment. Um, but I understand, why you have to have a censored version, but whatever, Disney. You can have Daredevil on Disney Plus, but you can't unbleep Hamilton.
That's very funny. Yeah. Well, I really hope there's no 8-year-olds watching Daredevil.
I hope so too, but I got to tell you, I mean, there's 8-year-olds watching Daredevil and Deadpool. Like,
Yeah. Probably Punisher
I
too.
know that they shouldn't be, but
Yeah.
yeah.
It's just so dark. So good, but dark. Um, We could probably continue through each of these songs. Hunter, is there anything that you want to highlight that we haven't yet?
Um, Honestly, I feel like there's not too much we can highlight that hasn't already been highlighted about Hamilton.
That's true.
I,
That's probably was true two
I,
hours ago.
yeah. Um, I, I got one highlight, and then I have a kind of a question that might get us into shaping and towards the end. Um,
Go for it.
okay. One last highlight about Hamilton that I really enjoy is that there are multiple lines that are refrains and that are used in different contexts to mean different things. Um, and it really it makes it really rich, and it makes it really re-listenable. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's why I can just re-listen to it over and over and over again. And this time I tracked one of the phrases, and it was uh, look around at how lucky we are to be alive right now. Um, which you first hear when the Schuyler sisters come on the stage. They're in Manhattan. History is happening in Manhattan. So look how lucky we are to be alive. It's Eliza's line. And then you hear it again when Hamilton is dismissed from the front lines and he comes back and Eliza is pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing she says to him is, look around at how lucky we are to be alive right now, with his child, which is really touching and adds another emotional
Mm-hmm.
context to the line. And then the third time you hear it is Hamilton um, explaining why he can't go upstate.
Oh my goodness.
They're trying to get him to go, and he's like, he's the Treasury Secretary, and he's like, look around at how lucky we are to be alive right now. And they're trying to get him to take a break. And then I think in the reconciliation song between Eliza, he says, look around, Eliza," um, when he's talking about being uptown and he's trying to reconcile with her. And that's just one example, and there's
Mm-hmm.
many other lines that you can track throughout the musical. Um, and it's it's amazing. It's that's why Hamilton, I think, is just, there's so much you can find in it every time you listen to it.
Mm.
So I have kind of a fun question, maybe not so fun. I was thinking when I was listening to it this time, I was thinking about whether or not we would have dueled when we were at Hamilton.
Oh, like whether we would have dueled when we were like each other or just in general.
Yeah, when we had a falling out,
Oh
you and
no.
I, like
So
if there was
yeah,
still dueling.
I was thinking about this as well. Something similar to it. When we were at Hamilton, I remember going to an event, the speaker in the chapel, where somebody was speaking, and I unfortunately have no idea if I ever took notes or where they would be about dueling and in the 18th century and what it was
Mhm.
and why it existed. And my mindset now is the same it was then. Probably having forgotten all the information I heard in between. I don't understand it. It sounds like the stupidest idea ever. I just
Mhm.
it infuriates me, the whole idea. I mean, it's a certain premise of this musical of Hamilton's life is just infuriating. Like, what a idiotic way to get rid of more lives for no gain. And like it goes back centuries, right? Dueling used to be done with swords and lances,
Yeah.
and like there's
Oh
a
yeah.
sense that it's been changed, like maybe sports now and things like that. But like, I feel like knowing me, now, I can't see myself ever having any desire to duel. Even if it's the cool thing, I think I'd be like, yeah, but that's such a stupid idea, and you're gonna get shot. I do feel that if I were to duel, I would shoot the gun in the air, though,
Throw away your shot.
because
Yeah.
that seems to be like in line with my personality.
Yeah. Like my wife said, dueling is what happens when women have no power. Which I'm not going to argue with. That's true. It's dueling is really dumb. You know, Burr says it. Can we agree that dueling is dumb and immature?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, but your man has to pay for his words, Burr. And it's like, on some level, I get it because I have a lot of pride. I don't like the fact that I'm very prideful, but I work on it, and in a certain sense, I can't help it, but I can help how I react. Um, and I can sort of understand. Like I read The Count of Monte Cristo, and there's dueling in that, and I got a sense of how, as stupid as dueling is, it might be harder for us to fully understand because the currency of our society is not honor.
Yeah.
Like insulting someone's honor is not as big of a deal now. Um, I mean, it's still like something you shouldn't do, but it's not like I feel like your career could almost be ruined if your honor was ruined. Your whole life could be changed um, because of someone's honor. So I sort of try to understand it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I I still think it's dumb, even back then,
Well,
but
I just don't understand how dueling is an honorable thing.
right,
That's the honor shame piece. We do not live in an honor shame culture. We live in
right.
primarily in a place of guilt or innocence. It's how we frame
Hmm.
a framework for a lot of things. Um, but the response to being shamed and like thus fighting for your honor or somebody else's being to kill somebody else or just shoot somebody, which if you shot somebody at that time period, like you killed them because of, or they had to get amputated because of just medicine and the lack thereof, and the damage of bullets. Like,
Yeah.
and I just that part that I understand that less than the honor piece.
Hmm.
I who
One of my favorite scenes in War and Peace, and incidentally, in the musical that is based on War and Peace, is which I hope we will do someday. We will do someday. Um, is a duel, and in War and Peace, it kind of really illustrates the absurdity of it, through the character's experience of the duel. Um, because I think with a lot of things, and I hope this will bring us full circle, maybe. Um, it's really hard to imagine what it's actually like. Um, we have lots of video games about war and killing and even doing sports. Um, you know, like when I think about cycling, sometimes when I was younger, I'd be like, I'm never gonna get dropped. I'm just gonna go fast. I'm just gonna try harder. And when you get out on the road and you're going up a hill, you just get tired. You're human. You're not, you can't just will past everything. Um, and I think it's kind might be easy for men to imagine that they can go out on dueling ground and uh, just I don't know, wound somebody or get wounded and everything will be fine. Um, we're very good at self-deception and tricking ourselves into ignorance that way. Um, and that's what that's the barrier that Hamilton breaks down to history. Like, because you read about history in high school and it all seems very uh, very um, controlled, not necessarily controlled, but like it makes sense. They have made sense of it. They understand history and how it happened and all this kind of stuff. But Hamilton like totally breaks that down and goes fully into the chaos of like living through history in the moment, because it's easy enough to look back on history knowing what happened and say, oh, he should have done that or that or that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's totally different when you're there and you don't know what's going to happen. And Hamilton really brings you into it,
Mm-hmm.
um, and brings you into the the full chaos and contradictions of our country as being a nation that propounds freedom and independence and yet enslaved hundreds of thousands of people. Um, and Alexander Hamilton himself, who did so many great things, created, we didn't even get into like, what Hamilton did for the country and the banks and the economy and
Post office.
manufacturing, like all the, yeah, all the stuff that he did. Um, and yet he also wrote the Reynolds pamphlet and did all of the things that led to the writing of the Reynolds pamphlet. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's just, it's really torrid. Um, and I think that's that's why I go back and watch it. That's why I keep coming back, is just to be brought into it again and keep reinterpreting it in our current day.
It's tough as in the conversations we have about stories and storytellers that shape us. We're talking about broken people and broken lives, broken stories full of joy and pain, full of ups and downs, full of the complexity of life. And there's a way that stories allow us to enter into that complexity when all we want to do is escape it. And when we live in a world that is trying to otherize people and to describe them based off of simplistic notions or one singular identity or one singular act or action or event, the reality is that we're missing and that we are complex people, and that the same person who came from a broken household on an island where he was, almost died multiple times and was given the chance to enter the United States and make a name for himself, and making a name for himself, is the same person who had an affair, is the same person whose father-in-law, his statues have been taken down throughout East Albany and Eastern New York because he had slaves. The founder of our country, or the first president of our country, was also an owner of slaves. And that's not to talk about all of the other aspects of sin that were clearly involved in their lives. And we get the opportunity to enter into those stories. Hopefully, not to make value comments. Maybe sometimes we do. But I think the real beauty of these conversations, so it brings me back to these conversations and these about stories and storytellers, is the opportunity to wrestle with stories that aren't my own, ideas I haven't thought of, history that is foreign to me, beautiful creations and spectacular disasters that leave me in awe, and a conversation partner to spar with along the way.
The final episode of season 2, I hope that you will indulge me in this cover of Dear Theodosia. I'm playing it as a parent, and I'm also dedicating it to my mom and sister who choreographed and performed a mother-daughter's dance for my sister's graduation that was beautiful. Dear Theodosia, what to say to you? You have my eyes, you have your mother's name. When you came into the world, you cried and broke my heart. I'm dedicating every day to you. Domestic life was never quite my style. When you smile, you knock me out, I fall apart. And I thought I was so smart. You will come of age with our young nation. You'll bleed and fight for you. We'll make it right for you. And if we lay a strong enough foundation, we'll pass it on to you. We'll give the world to you, and you'll blow us all away. Someday, someday. Yeah, you'll blow us all away. Someday, someday. Oh, Philip, when you smile I am undone. My son, look at my son. Pride is not the word I'm looking for. There is so much more inside me now. Oh, Philip, you outshine the morning sun. My son, when you smile, I fall apart. And I thought I was so smart. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll make a million mistakes. I'll make the world safe and sound for you. You will come of age in our strange nation. There's bleeding in the streets, and love can't find a seat. But if we teach you peace and reconciliation, we'll pass it on to you. We'll give the world to you to blow us all away. Someday, someday, yeah, you'll blow us all away. Someday. I hope you enjoy this version of Dear Theodosia that I could barely get through without crying.